Hello again, you sick, twisted weather freaks, and welcome to another fun-filled, action-packed, and intellectually stimulating edition of This Week in Weather. I'm your host and meteorologist DT from Weather Risk, your captain of chaos, your colonel of confusion, your commander of catastrophe. Let's talk about this week in weather for this Thursday, midday, February 6th. A couple of items to talk about. First, we're going to talk about the February 8th and 9th Pennsylvania ice storm and New England snowstorm, maybe even New York City. And then we'll talk about the February 11th and 12th event, which a couple of days ago the GFS model went absolutely bonkers and apeshit with, and proving that solution, of course, is proven to be far too extreme. It's shifting to the north in all the models because of the upper air pattern, and it looks more like a mid-Atlantic ice storm than anything else, especially in the interior. And we'll talk about rain, two rain events, February 14, 15, 16, and then as the MJO switches into phase 8 and phase 1, second half of February. So let's go right to it. First, here is the website in case you haven't seen it before. And we have a lot of products you can sell. We have snow removal, the shop page for you snow removal folks out there. We also have the 3-week newsletter and the Mid-Atlantic forecast, and of course the grain commodities for those of you that do that sort of thing. There is the Grain Weather Risk Twitter page, and here is the Blue Sky page. Just thought I'd point that out to you. And then here is just to start out by taking a look at the early morning. This is at 2 a.m. this morning. You can see quite a bit of freezing rain in the Shenandoah Valley up close to D.C. and Northern Virginia, Piedmont, Western and Central Maryland, and then up into Pennsylvania. And it was very hit and miss. Some areas in the Northern Shenandoah Valley got slammed with that much power lines down, trees down. Some areas just had a light glaze. So, and of course, in Washington and Baltimore, temperatures are very marginal. They didn't get much there at all. All right, so this is where we are right now, and I just pointed out this we are in phase 6. So there is the MJO right there in phase 6. You see it? Okay. So when you're in phase 6, I talked about this last time. This is the upper air pattern. You get a big ridge over the eastern United States. You have a trough on the west coast, and then you have a ridge, an omega ridge here in the Pacific Northwest. And as we'll see the upper air map, this is exactly what the current jet stream pattern, or 500 millibar pattern is. Identical. So we'll keep that in mind here, okay? And of course, when you have this ridge here in the trough, that's a very mild pattern, and that's where we are. Now, as we go forward in time, the MJO will give us a clue of how this pattern is going to evolve. So here we have the European, the GFS extended, and the CFS. And this will take us, you can see here, the models are shifting. Now, last time, the European had this going into the neutral circle, but you can see now, let me blow up the European so you can see it a little more detail here. And you can see that it now extended out into phase 7 here, February 12th, 13th, and then phase 8 of 14, 15, 16, and then at the end it curls into the neutral circle. Now, this is called regression to the mean. Just goes back to the the mean here, which is the neutral circle. But if you look at the yellow lines here, many of them are in phase 8 and 1. So it's very probable that as this advances into February 6th and February 8th and February 9th, this blue and purple line will come further out into phase 8 and phase 1 and phase 2. Okay. Now this was the GFS extended, and you can see the same sort of thing going on here. Again, phase 7, phase 8, and curls into the neutral circle. I don't know if that's correct. That's regression to the mean. And then here's the CFS extended, which has been the hot model as of late. And again, phase 7, phase 8, and then it curls into the neutral circle by the first week of March. Again, I don't know if that's correct or not, but that's where we're going with the data. So that's kind of important. And the reason why we want to talk about this is because of what this means. Obviously, the big uncertainty is what happens after February 20th. Does the MJO go into phase 8 or phase 1? So this is phase 7 here, where we are now, about to go into phase 7, which you can see is still pretty mild. Then phase 8, it turns much colder on the East Coast. Phase 1 and phase 2 is quite cold in February. So there certainly is potential here, and we just have to see it as it progresses. Now again, this is our 500 millibar map, and you can see what happens the winter months. Phase 7, here's phase 6 with a very strong ridge on the East Coast. The phase 7, it begins to fade. Phase 8, you have your big negative anomaly here for winter storms and cold. It continues in phase 1, and even to some degree into phase 2. So that's where we're trying to head. And to show you in more detail what phase 7 looks like, let me go back here. This is phase 6. So when we go to phase 7, what this actually looks like here, let me show you this image. This is La Nina phase 7 MJO. Wow. Okay, the R stands for ridge, as you can imagine, and the PV stands for your polar vortex. So phase 7 La Nina, you have a massive ridge across the eastern U.S., the southeast into the mid-Atlantic, and then into the western Atlantic Ocean. And you have a big ridge in the eastern Pacific. And as we'll see in the upper air map in just a second here, that is exactly what we're looking at. And as we go further out in time, we'll see that phase 7 pattern develop very nicely. Okay, so that's phase 7. Now, if we go into phase 8, okay, we can see some interesting things here. This is phase 8, and you can see we have a very strong positive anomaly, a huge block in Greenland. This is and up at the Arctic level as well. So we have a negative AO and a negative NAO, Greenland block, and a huge negative anomaly on the East Coast. So phase 8 in February is known as the snowstorm phase for the East Coast. That's what it's known for. And then we go to phase 8, and we can still see a pretty good ridging here in Greenland and in Western Canada, and a nice ridge trough on the East Coast. So phase 1 is also pretty good. But you can see phase 8 is really known as, like I said, the snowstorm phase. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about our teleconnections and see how they're phasing up. So, again, teleconnections are significant relationships or links between weather phenomena at widely separate locations, which typically entail climate patterns that span thousands of miles. So, the MJO is a teleconnection. Okay, the El Nino and La Nina is a teleconnection. And here we have jet stream teleconnections. We have 2 on the Pacific and 2 on the Atlantic. Okay, actually, you can see them here. Let me get rid of this one. There you go. These are the 2 on the Pacific, and these are the 2 on the Atlantic. So we take a look at that, and we'll go into some detail about this. So on the Atlantic side of things, so the Arctic Oscillation is connected to the polar vortex. When the polar vortex is weak, or when it comes south, the Arctic Oscillation is more likely to be negative. Now, a negative Arctic Oscillation, which is what we're seeing here, all these models here, favors below normal temperatures in the eastern U.S. and increased storminess, while a positive AO, which is what we are right now, February 5, 6, favors above normal temperatures, which we've seen, and less storminess. And the activity is more centered across the western U.S. and the upper plains. So the black dots here, this is where we had been. Now look at the projections. By February 11th, the Arctic Oscillation is strongly negative, and it stays that way all the way till the end of the month. Now the operational GFS, the dots here, red dots bring it up to neutral, but none of the other models do that. That's probably bullshit. Okay, here's the NAO. Now the NAO, same thing. Okay, it's the Quebec, Labrador, Greenland area. So it may or may not be the same phase as the Arctic Oscillation. When the NAO is negative, that's called the Greenland block. All right, and the further west it is, the better for the eastern U.S. So you can have a negative NAO by Iceland, or by Greenland, or by Labrador, or even to Quebec. And when you have a positive NAO, it favors above normal temperatures in the eastern U.S., but below normal in Midwest of the Plain States. Again, that's pretty much what we've seen. And the East Coast lows, when they do form, tend to go inland. Now, as you can see, again, here we've been positive. Now, starting right here, February 6th or 7th, the models go negative by February 8th or 9th, and they stay pretty negative all the way through until almost the end of the month. Okay, on the Pacific side, we have 2 here. We have the EPO and the PNA. Now, the EPO is the Alaskan Ridge or Trough. That's what that is. When it is in the negative phase, that's the Alaskan Ridge. And it favors below normal temperatures in the eastern U.S. and increased storminess, especially with the negative AO. And a strongly negative EPO can lead to a severe or Arctic outbreak, a cold air outbreak. A positive EPO favors near normal or above normal temperatures in the central and eastern U.S., but below normal in the west coast on the Rockies with increased storminess. So, as you can see here, let me bring this forward. Oops, no, there we go. Bring forward. So there we are. We've been negative, and now we go pretty much negative here at the EPO. Now, as we get towards the middle of February, most of the models go close to neutral. It's kind of a spread here, so let's just call this neutral for the time being. And then finally, the PNA here. That's the West Coast trough, the West Coast ridge. As you can see, we've been negative, which means a West Coast trough, and we stay negative all the way through the month, approaching neutral by the end of February. And again, negative favors below normal temperatures in the western U.S., and the Rockies, Pacific Northwest, the West Coast, along with increased storminess. And to some degree, the plains of the upper Midwest gets quite stormy. But a big negative P&A also causes a ridge on the eastern U.S., which leads to above normal temperatures and below normal precip. Okay, so that's where we are. So the Atlantic side, the P&A does not look great. The EPO looks okay. That's on the Pacific side. On the Atlantic side, both of these look pretty good. All right. So this is the upper air pattern here. This is actually February 6th. Let me just change the date on this thing here. February 6th. Okay, so as you can see here, as I talked about this earlier, there's your trough here in the Pacific Northwest, extending out in the eastern Pacific Ocean, and there you have your ridge on the east coast. All right, and this is just mild Pacific air. All the cold air at this point is bottled up north of the U.S.-Canada border. That's where we are right now. This is classic phase 6 setup. And to show you what phase looks, I think I have phase 6 here somewhere. Yeah, phase 6, I think I posted that. Let me see where phase 6 was. Nope, I didn't post it. Yeah. Yep, there's phase 6. Excuse me. I did post it. Okay. There's phase 6 like I showed earlier. There it is. And sure enough, that's exactly what we're seeing right here. I mean, you couldn't, textbook comparison between the two. And now, here we go. This is now for February 9th. And again, not much has changed here. We can see the trough is building down on the west coast of Canada into California, Nevada, and the ridge is quite strong across the deep south, as far north as Interstate 70. All right. Now you get a couple of waves of low pressure moving across the northern tier, but essentially south of Interstate 80, it's not wintry. It's not bad at all. Now we are going to have another event coming up here for this weekend. And again, it'll be coming out of this trough, and some like here, where I can see here, and it's going to track up through the Ohio Valley, right along the boundary between the warm air and the cold air. So here it is, February 8th or 9th. This is the early morning, February 6th European, the 6Z run. And, oops, wrong, I didn't want to do that. I call up my marker here. There we go. There's the low in Missouri. There's your front. The high's moving off the coast. The cold air is up in the upper plains, upper Midwest. And you got nice rain in the Ohio Valley all the way through. And now once it gets to Pennsylvania, the cold air is in place here enough, so you end up getting freezing rain because you have cold air at the surface, but it's too warm aloft because of this ridge. It's way too warm because of this ridge aloft, okay, to support snow. So as a result, you get freezing rain in Pennsylvania, and then you get a significant snowstorm, let's say north of Interstate 80, maybe into New York City, then New York State, a little bit of the eastern Great Lakes, and then New England get pounded. Here's the ice coming in for this storm for Pennsylvania. Northern Virginia to some degree, northwest Virginia, eastern panhandle of West Virginia, western and central Maryland, and then Pennsylvania. This looks like a bad ice storm. This has got serious potential here to be a crippling ice storm. So this has got to be watched very carefully here. And in Northern Virginia, how bad does it look? Well, it depends on your temperatures. Now, this is Saturday night at 7 p.m. And we can see, let me get rid of that, sorry. Call up my marker again here. I'm just going to come, here we go. There it is. So there's our temperatures, February 8th at 7 p.m. 29, 30, 31, 30 in D.C., right? That's, and then in Central Maryland, 28, 29. This is all heavy freezing rain temperatures. Now, the GFS is a little bit warmer. As you can see, it's 33 in D.C., 34 in Northern Virginia, 32 in Winchester, and then 30, 29 in northern Maryland. So it's a bit warmer on the GFS. I like the European solution here. I think that's correct. So I kind of like that solution a little better here. And as you can see, locally what happens is on the European, it's got more freezing rain and sleet than the GFS does. But notice it's just northern Virginia. Nothing south. Everything is north of Fredericksburg, north of Charlottesville. Northern Virginia ice storm. Again, I don't know how bad it's going to be. I think Pennsylvania and northern Maryland will really hit pretty hard with this event. It looks like to me. All right. Now let's talk about the next event. All right. Once this system here goes up into New England, the cold high comes down, we get some cold air. There's the front. The front goes down into the southern states where it stalls, and that sets up February 11th and 12th. And I've been talking about this event for a while. If you go into social media, you'll see lots of stuff on YouTube with people talking about historic snowstorm, this storm, blizzards, all this other bullshit. Okay, fine. That all comes from the GFS model. Back on February 2nd, which was, I think, Sunday. The GFS came out with this extreme solution which had this huge snowstorm for the lower mid-Atlantic bypassing New England, as you can see. And you can see it had a huge amount of snow. This is complete crap. 30 to 34 inches in Fredericksburg, in Farmville and Charlottesville, complete nonsense. 23 inches in Richmond. No, nonsense, BS, nonsense, wrong, not going to happen. Okay. The reason why the model was doing this was because this also covers the second event, which comes in on the 12th and the 13th. So there's actually two events here. And there's the European from February 4th, a little better, but here notice the European has a lot more sleet and freezing rain, mostly freezing rain in southwest Virginia, central Virginia, up into the central Delmarva, and all the heavy snow is in the northwest third of Virginia, the Shenandoah Valley, perhaps DC, Baltimore, up into Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and then into New England. Okay, that was February 4, okay, which was 2 days ago. Now, what happens here is as we approach February 11th, the trough in the Pacific Northwest here begins to drop southward and east. As it drops southward, the ridge intensifies. So the low pressure areas coming out of Kansas and Missouri have to track over the top of the ridge. And what that means is that the cold air doesn't get in as fast, as strong as we earlier thought. So what's happening is this is shifting to the north. With each run, it's looking more freezing rain and sleet to rain in the mid-Atlantic, and the snow is restricted to Pennsylvania, New York, and New England, not south of the Pennsylvania Turnpike, really. Maybe into DC, Baltimore. Sure, they'll get some snow out of this, but it's trending warmer. There's no doubt about it. Let me show you what I mean here. All right, so this is February 5, okay, and you can see here that text. All right, so this is European from yesterday, and you can see it's got a lot of freezing rain here, and then the snow in DC, Baltimore coming in, right? And this is what the heavy rain looks like potentially for the event. That's February. That was yesterday's run. Now here is February 6th. Today's European, and this is the 12Z run. So it's the latest we have. And there's your short wave, and there's your ridge, very strong. So this short wave, February 10th, comes across. Another piece of energy comes out and tries to ride over the top of the ridge, and that creates your overrunning storm. That's what we're looking at here. This is overrunning. This is not a coastal storm. It's not a huge nor'easter. It's nothing like that. It's an overrunning, moderate-sized low-pressure area with a lot of moisture to work with. Now, that is valid for Monday afternoon on February 10. That's the upper map. If you look at it in close range, this is the same map. And you can see the ridge here. See how strong that ridge is? So the low has to go over the top of the ridge. So it is too warm, and the track is forced further to the north. So again, this looks like a New England snowstorm, a New York State snowstorm, a Pennsylvania snowstorm, an Ohio snowstorm, and then some snow in DC and Baltimore, far northern Virginia. Anything south of that, this looks like freezing rain to rain, in my opinion. The heights, this ridge is just too strong. Remember what this ridge represents. This ridge represents warm air to mid-levels of the atmosphere. All right? And that's why, so it's too warm for the snow to come down as all snow. So it melts and you get your mixture of sleet or freezing rain and rain. All right, and there's your mean trough on the west coast, and there's your shortwave going through Manitoba. This is February 6th, early morning European. You can see what it's doing. Look how much further north it is. All right? You get some snow in northern Maryland and northern Virginia, up into DC, Baltimore, a little bit of freezing rain, all rain in Richmond and in Lynchburg, and then quickly going over lift to the north. The sleet and the freezing rain is now put into DC here. Baltimore is still snow by 7 p.m. on February 11th. And then you have moderate to heavy snow in Hagerstown and Frederick and Gettysburg and Harrisburg and Pennsylvania and Lancaster and York and Wilmington and New York and Connecticut and southern New England get blasted. Okay. Now, beyond that, again, this is looking at the upper end maps at 120 hours out. This is the morning of the 11th, which is when this event begins, on the 11th. And as you can see, let me blow this up so you can shrink this one a little bit. There's your ridge, very nice here, and there's the low trying to move over the top of the ridge. And there's just too much warm air aloft. So the system is, the low is climbing latitude. It's not headed due east to Virginia, it's going through the top of Virginia. And you can see it here. Look how strong the ridge is. That's just too much warm air at the mid-levels of the atmosphere to support snow in central or southern Virginia or North Carolina or West Virginia or what have you. This is the GFS. Now, the GFS is colder. Okay, I think the solution is bullshit. I think it's overdoing the cold air. Given this upper air pattern, I just think it's overdoing the cold air too much. But I could be wrong. But I don't think this is correct. Here, the GFS, 1 o'clock on February 11th, as you can see. I'll shrink this one a little bit down. Blows up a little bit. It's got snow and ice in Roanoke and in Richmond and over towards Williamsburg and down towards Roanoke. You can see that. And then also heavy snow in Charlottesville, Fredericksburg, D.C., pushing up to Baltimore, Hagerstown, western Maryland, northern portions of West Virginia. Moderate snow in the southern half of the Ohio Valley. All right? That's at 1 o'clock on Friday, 1 o'clock on February 11th. Now, by 10 p.m., it's got a raging ice storm just to the north, from Richmond north and west, into Roanoke, into Lynchburg, into Charlottesville. A lot of ice here. North of that, D.C. is still snow. So is Baltimore. Barely, but according to the GFS, still snow. And you have heavy snow in northwest Virginia, western and central Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, going to New York. It looks like a big storm. Again, look at the low pressure area. Not very strong. 1012, it's overrunning. Okay? Just waves of low pressure move along the front with access to Gulf of Mexico moisture. And then this is the European by 1 a.m. on February 12th. Now, most of the precip has ended in Virginia. Okay, still getting some freezing rain in northern Maryland, but look at New York's getting pounded. Okay, Philly's gone over to freezing rain, Baltimore's rain, D.C.'s rain, but New England is getting pounded. Big snow for New England. Again, not a big storm at all. Look at that low pressure area, 1006. Okay, and there's a cold Arctic high coming in now in Minneapolis, St. Paul, headed for Wisconsin. To show you the 850 temperatures, okay. So when the event begins on the European and on the GFS, this is at 5 a.m. on Wednesday, February 11th. There's your rain snow line. Okay, right here. See the difference between the light gray or green, whatever color it is, and the purple? There's your zero line, your snow line. So it's south of Richmond and along the North Carolina border. 5 a.m., GFS, same sort of thing, right? And then you can see what happens. Richmond is -2, -3, so is on both models. You can see DC's -4, -5, -6 on the GFS, all right? Then, by the time we get to 4 or 5 o'clock on the afternoon of the 11th, you can see here, again, the 850 temperatures move way to the north. Look at it, north of Richmond. Richmond's +3 on the European, and it's 0 on the GFS. This is way too cold, in my opinion. Okay, so it's lifting north. Now, D.C. is still snow. Northern Virginia's all snow. It's Shenandoah Valley's getting pounded. Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey. Yeah, you're fine. No worries. Okay, that's February 11th. I did not post snow maps yet, accumulations, because I just think it's too early. Maybe I'll do that on Friday or something, or Saturday. Okay, here is February 13, 14. Now here, we see a bigger problem. The ridge on the East Coast is increasing. Look at this and compare that to, let me bring this down here, this. Okay, that's February 11th. This is February 13th. February 11th, February 13th. Now, why is the ridge increasing? Well, the trough is coming east and diving into Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas, and that causes the ridge to pop up. Now, eventually what's going to happen is, okay, this trough will all move east and will knock the ridge down. The other thing that's important is the blocking, which is developed at the high latitudes. Now, that eventually is going to force the entire vortex south. When it does, it'll destroy the southeast ridge, and the East Coast will be in business. But this is going to take time for this to happen. At this point, February 13th, whatever, 12th, we are in phase 7, moving into phase 8, it looks like on the MJO models. So this is the transition pattern. This is what's going to happen eventually. Okay? And again, the block here, this block is significant because what happens is, it is these two features here merging. The Alaskan Ridge block, or the EPO, and the Greenland block, the NAO, they merge. Okay, and you get this monster block here in the Arctic region. And that forces the vortex further south. So, okay, this is February now, the evening of the 12th. All All right, the first storm is over. February 11th is over. And now you can see it's just dry conditions here. But there's the next wave developing. All right? And then here, again, maybe some freezing rain in the valley in Virginia and then in Western Maryland. Everybody else, DC's rain, Baltimore's rain, Philly's rain, New York City's probably rain. There's not enough cold air in here. This is stale cold air, and the heights are rising. So all this is rain. Okay? And you can see that. In New York City might be snow or sleet at the beginning, but it's going to go over to rain. This is another New England, Northeast Pennsylvania, New York State snowstorm, and also maybe for the upper Midwest. It's a very wet pattern, but it's just too warm. At the south of Interstate 80, it's just too warm. All right. And then as we go to February 15, 16, again, you can see that the ridge here remains in place. Now here, this is a little more aggressive, 162, but this flies up, this low flies up in this direction, and we're still waiting for this main trough to come east. This is the one that has to come east to change the pattern. And slowly, you can see it's beginning to bang its way steadily eastward. Okay, now by February 15th, it's in the Rockies and the Plain States. And the ridge is beginning to weaken. And the block is beginning to push the vortex further south. So now your cold air begins to come into play. Now, the model data still has this event February 15, 16 as rain. The European is way warm. I mean, you can see the low is, I don't know if you can see it here, but the low is here in West Virginia. DC is +3, Richmond's +6 or 7. I mean, it's just way too warm. The zero line is up at New York City already at 850, so that's the snow line. So you can see this is February 15, the evening, and the GFS has a much weaker system, okay, and it's a little colder, but I'm sure it's wrong. So that's where that next system, February 15, 16. Now, once we get past that event, then we're back in the soup, okay. And this is February 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th. So here's the European. And bring it front. Okay, February 16th, 17th. Your polar vortex is almost in James Bay, Canada. That's a significant shift southward. That's driving the intense Arctic cold southward. The trough is now centered in the Midwest. All right, and we're now getting direct flow of Arctic air of Canada into the upper Midwest and New England. So this is a very promising looking pattern. That's February. And then you can see it continues here on this map. You can see it. There we go. This is February 19th. It looks just really great. So, and in fact, if you look at the 850 temperature, you'll see they get dramatically colder here after February 15th. So, and in summary, in my view, given all what we're seeing here on the MJO and what we're seeing here, it is quite amazing that we are going to get any kind of winter storm weather in Phase 7 in the MJO on February 11th. It's quite amazing. We're going to see anything on February 11th. It's just, a lot of people are going, well, why can't they all snow? I wish it would. No, you're lucky to get this. You're lucky to get this because you just don't get a lot of big storms February 11th. Now, the other example of this is a lot of times you'll see people say, well, you don't need to have a negative NAO to get snowstorm. You don't need to have an Arctic oscillation to get snowstorm. If you're in New England, if you're in upstate New York, if you're in northern Pennsylvania, that's true. Okay, you can get them with very marginal conditions, and this is one of them. But for the rest of the mid-Atlantic region, and for the really big ones to stay all snow and get the really, really big ones, then you really do need those negative Arctic oscillations, the negative NAO, the Greenland blocks. You really do need them. But if you're in New England or the mountains of Pennsylvania, New York, no, you can still get a substantial snowstorm without them. That's true. All right, that's the presentation. Hopefully you enjoyed this. This is meteorologist DT from Weather Risk. I'll see you over on the Weather Risk website and on the Blue Sky page and on the Facebook page.